Hi, I'm with Thrive Meetings and Events and Eating at a Meeting, and welcome to the weekly podcast. And today I'm excited to have from London, England, Kim Azari from Innosensi. And Kim, after curating and producing large international corporate events in the tech space for over 15 years, in 2008, she founded Innosensi, a sensory innovation studio that fuels creativity and innovation through cross-modal experiences designed to help us reconnect ourselves, each other, and the environment using principles from neuro and behavioral sciences. Innosensi experiences, which mainly take place around a dining table, which is eating at a meeting, uses sensory engagement to break down barriers, challenge assumptions, and help us innovate inside out. And I'm going to go from there instead of reading that rest of that, Kim. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to learn more about what you do. So we were talking, tell everybody how you went from corporate America planning these big tech events to talking about cross-modal experiences using our senses.
Well, as you so eloquently put, I was working in the events industry for many years and curating and producing big conferences around the globe in the tech industry from London, actually. I've been living here for 21 years. I'm from Canada, Vancouver, but I live here. So, but yeah, I was putting on these big tech shows around the world. And I just started to feel that, first of all, food and beverage was something that was really overlooked. A lot of the budget, as you say, is spent on it, but we don't really just give them some lunch, give them some dinner. But that's not the main thing. The main thing was that I felt people were walking around quite numb. I felt that they're sitting in these sessions, half of their attention is maybe on the stage, half on their phones. Everyone's just walking around almost like robots, and these events become formulaic. One is the same as the other, just change who's on stage, basically. And I just thought there must be more. I want to wake these people up. I think not just in conferences and events, and generally in life, we are walking around quite numb. And I'm almost worried, I am worried that we're becoming robotic ourselves. We talk about, the coming of the robots and all of this, but we're becoming robots. We're just touching screens all day long. From the moment we wake up till when we go to bed, we're in front of a screen. And so we're not engaging our other senses. And I think part of being human is being a sensory being. We are sensory. We need to touch and to smell and to listen and to, taste and so forth. So I thought, how can I wake people up to start thinking differently? And that's where I came up with the idea of using the senses to do that. And there's actually a lab at Oxford University called the Cross-Modal Lab.
Okay.
Run by Professor Charles Spence. And it was actually through a workshop I did with him that I was like, wow, this is what I need to be doing. Because he works with, sound designers and chefs and perfumers and, from virtual reality and all kinds of things, and brings it together and just shows how one impacts the other. All our senses are impacted by the other. And I just started getting excited. And so I thought, if there's a way that I can bring people around a table, because I love hosting and I love food, and use the senses to kind of get them out of their heads and to think not even think, to feel something different and to be awakened, then let's try it. So from my crazy idea in my head, I did the first one and it seemed to work. So from there, I just kept going. So yeah.
And that is so true, because when you watch food shows and you listen to all those chefs, or even movies that senses together, the smell and the taste, the smell and the taste of what we're eating, so that it's not just rubber chicken that we're just throwing people through, or those breaks that we do run people through. You've got 15 minutes to eat your break and your coffee and get it all and then go. And you said something earlier to me that, it has to, even we might be getting the nutrients that we need from a smoothie that we've made because we've added all these great protein powders and things like that. But if you're chugging it while you're running down the street, it's really not doing you any good. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we focus a lot nowadays, especially on what we eat, right? We're told we need our daily 5 a day, and we need certain proteins, and there's always a new fad anyway. No carbs, more protein, no dairy, this, that, whatever. And, I think more and more people are aware of what they're putting in their body. And we're trying to be more healthy and really think about that. But the part we're not thinking about enough is how we eat. So what we eat is very important, of course, but how we eat it is almost just as important. There was actually a study done. This is interesting. I read about this a few years ago. There was a study done in the 60s where they traced, they looked at Japanese, middle-aged Japanese men in Japan and how their diet was. And then they eat a lot of greens and fish, right? And then they compared it to, American men in the 60s, businessmen kind of thing, middle-aged. Now their diet wasn't. They were getting a lot of coronary heart disease and diabetes, and they were not doing well. And, this is when fast food became popular, McDonald's and all of this. And so it made sense, right? They're not eating very healthily. So what they did is then they tracked a big group, thousands of Japanese men who moved to the US. And they thought, okay, we're going to track both now side by side, the American men and the Japanese men of the same age, and track them through a few years and see how their heart is, their health is overall. And they found that the Japanese men, of course, they were getting more heart disease than they would in Japan. Okay, you can say, well, they probably discovered McDonald's and all this horrible way of eating. But it wasn't only that, because they found that even the men who were buying the same types of foods they bought in Japan, like fish and green vegetables, and doing more cooking, eating in those kind of places, because of the stress of life in the US and the way they were eating at their desk, shoving it down, or quick meal after work before another meeting, they were getting sick too. So
wow,
it's interesting because they automatically thought it was the diet, but it wasn't only the diet, because even the people eating the healthy food were getting sick too. So it's just to say, and if you look at the blue zone, where the blue zones in the world where people live really long and they have healthy lives, they make a big deal about sitting down at the table, commensality, sitting around a table together and making a whole production of the meal. In Italy and France and Greece, this is a thing. You take time in the middle of your day, you take the time to sit, you have respect for the food, you have respect for lunch, and it goes down better. So you can have your wine, your cheese, your bread, and everything because you're eating it in a very relaxed, healthy way. So it sits in your body better and you feel better.
And you're able to digest it. And I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and one of the things that they were like chewing, taking the time to actually chew your food. And they're like, you should chew it at least 50 times. And that's kind of really hard sometimes, some foods, to chew it 50 times, but that helps it digest better. Exactly. Because you're taking the time instead of getting, I have this bad habit of eating an apple, and I know I don't chew it all the way because I get choke on the apple, when it's going down. So because again, you're trying to eat it as fast as you can for whatever reason.
Exactly. And if you think about it, a lot of people are so busy with their work and their fast-paced lifestyle, especially if you live in a big city, that often you're eating your lunch in front of your screen at your desk at work. And then in the evening, you might be coming home and watching Netflix and eating your dinner in front of Netflix, ordering on, an app. I'm just saying typical, whatever. Yeah. And if you think about it, you're not going to be ordering very healthy food if you do that, because you're not tasting it anyway. You're just chugging it down while you're focused on something else.
Right.
So not only are you not picking the foods that are probably healthiest for you, but the way you're eating it is not healthy. So the whole thing will not leave you feeling very good. And this affects both your physical health and your mental health. So it's something to think about. Totally.
Now, I know there's the dining in the dark, right? Where you go in and you blind. So how is that? How are your dinners? And I know you've been doing virtual dinners. How are your sensory dinners different from that?
So that's one aspect of our dinners. So I have different dinners I do. So one is called Sensing the Future. And this one is created specifically for leadership teams in corporates or any companies. And it's a 5-course meal where we focus on one sense per course, and we practice the skills needed for the future of work. So the future of work for now, we need them now. Let's face it. Emotional intelligence, things like empathy and trust, and creativity and negotiation and active listening. All of these things are practiced throughout the dinner through the senses. So we do use, so for our course, for example, on sight, we do blindfold half the table and the other half feeds them. I don't want to say too much because I'm doing this soon for our company, but each course will be really focused on one sense. So you might be listening to something and eating something, and it doesn't really go together, and you're wondering, you know, your sense of hearing is telling you it's one thing, but you don't really taste that. And it's, you know, that's working on your critical thinking. Can you decipher without the noise? Like, can you figure it out? So we practice these skills through the senses. And by the end of the meal, you basically practiced all the skills listed in the World Economic Forum's top skills of the future. So, yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so that's one of our concepts. The other one that I've done quite a few times now for different organizations is called Root to Flower. And that was the very first multisensory dining experience I did. And that is all about celebrating the plant. So it's about plant-based eating and also about food waste. Root to Flower is a concept that I didn't create, but I just am promoting it through my dinner. It's about not wasting the fruits and vegetables. So if you think about it, when you cook or you make a salad or whatever, you're chopping off a big part of the vegetable, right? You might have a leek and you chop off 30 to 40% by the time you've taken off both sides, the celery or the carrots. Not only that, the farmers are only selling a certain part of the vegetable to the shops because the shops know they can't sell the other parts that people are not recognizing. So it's making people more aware that there's actually lots of parts of these fruits and vegetables that you can use. You can use the radish leaves in a salad. You can use the carrot tops in a puree. So in the Root to Flower dinner, we use every part of everything we use. So if we have carrots in one dish, the carrot tops will be found somewhere else in the meal. Everything is used. But it's also a plant-based experience where each course celebrates a different part of the plant. So we start by eating seeds and earth. Actually, out of the earth, we eat the dirt. It's edible earth. And then we go to roots. We have a course that's just roots. It can be anything from, you know, any root vegetable, but it's done in a very creative way. Then we go to stems, then leaves, then the fruit, then the flower. And the purpose is to show people that plants can be so tasty. There's so much you can do with them. And also to give you, again, a multi-sensory experience. So with the Root to Flower, the first one I did, and I've done them many times now, we build a set. So you're in a forest. So you come in and you smell the forest, you hear the forest, you sit down at a table, your feet are immersed in the earth and the leaves. You know, on the table, there's grass and leaves and earth. So you're really getting a fully multisensory experience eating the plant. So you leave with a very different impression of plant-based cuisine. And I also incorporate technology sometimes. So in the very first Root to Flower dining experience, we used virtual reality headsets and we had augmented reality just to take you a bit further. So again, as you described, what we do is that we always like to challenge perceptions. So we had people put on the VR headset and they were fed a little mini burger in their hand and they were eating it. And in virtual reality, they were seeing like a real barbecue and grilling, and they were smelling, the whole room smelled of barbecue, and they were hearing the sizzle of the fat on the barbecue. You know, they really felt like they're in a barbecue. And when they took off the headset, I told them that they just ate a burger made of leeks. And they're like, but no, that's impossible. That tasted like a burger. Exactly. Your senses are telling you one thing, you know, your sight, your smell. Actually, the taste was not of meat, but it just shows you, if you change your perception of what meat is, you might actually enjoy something that's not meat as meat. And so, as you know, 70 to 90% of our taste comes through our olfactory receptors, through our sense of smell. So we can really trick ourselves that way.
Right. And you're eating, and you eat with your eyes, you know, so much. And so changing that perception, because when you go through the buffet or the grocery store, and that's why they say don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry, because you will buy all this other stuff. So Lennon just posted something like this. We need a lot of open conversations about a critical perspective. That is so true. And everything that we see right now, with COVID, I think the biggest play on everything is that we're trying to feed people.
Yeah.
Because people have lost their jobs and we're worried about restaurant workers. But the thing that we're all coming together to do is feed people. And I think that shows or reiterates that is like our basic need is to eat. But I don't want us, but what you're doing is helping us, teaching us that just don't scarf it down, enjoy that. And even if you're the server in one of these food lines or the food banks, get to know those people who are coming through versus, as individuals who need food, but they're also just individuals.
Yeah. And there's a lot of innovation around helping feed each other. I don't know if you have it in the US, but here we have an app called Olio.
No.
And it's all about food waste. It's trying to prevent food waste.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you are leaving town or whatever, you have some fruits and vegetables or whatever in your fridge.
Right.
Typically, we would just go, we're leaving town, throw it out or whatever. But even if you have 2 bananas and 2 tomatoes and a few things left, why throw it? There's someone else who could use it. So you just take a picture of it in the fridge, put it on the app, and it's all location based. So your neighbor might see it and go, oh yeah, I'll come take that. And you just swap with each other. And it's so beautiful because we're helping each other and we're not wasting food. 30% of food in the world is wasted.
Yeah.
And that 30% is wasted at home in most of Western countries. It's all at home. So
in the US, that number is 40%.
Okay.
10% higher.
Yeah.
Did you go to the World Expo in Italy, in Milan?
No, I didn't get there.
Yeah, I was going for IMEX, but I'm like, oh my God, Shauna, Suko, I'm like, we've got to go to this. And the very first exhibition when you walked into the World Expo, and this was in 2015, was all about food waste. Yeah. And that just blew my mind about how much that we waste globally and, at home and at our events. And I talk about this statistic a lot is that we, food and beverage is our number one expenditure on event budgets, right? And we spend the least amount of time probably planning for it and using that money. And then to think about that 40% of what we're spending is wasted.
Exactly.
Like, what could you do with that extra if you've got $100 budget, what could you do with that other $40 per person?
Yeah.
To make that experience better.
Strangely enough, COVID I think, will have a positive spin on this because we can't have these open buffets where people are all touching the same food, right? It's not hygienic. It never was, but now especially we're aware of that. I heard, for example, they're like in breakfast buffets, instead of having the buffet in the hotel, they're bringing little things, individual things to each person's place setting. So you get a little bit of the egg and a little bit of the pancakes or whatever, which is probably more than enough for each person. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of eating, taking away the open buffets where people, as you say, eat with their eyes and just giving people what they need, I think already is going to really waste.
That's a really good point because, one of the things that I've heard and I've said it myself is make your plate smaller when you're going through the buffet line, but this is going to actually help reduce that altogether. Make it even because your servings. I mean, think about the nutrition plates that the Canadian government and the U.S. FDA put out about what you should actually have on your plate, and then think about what people go through the buffet line, and it's like stacked high. It's really crazy.
And you can use the senses also. That comes into play also with the food waste and with what your diet is, because, for example, if you put a dessert on a white plate versus a black plate, it's going to taste 15% sweeter on the white plate. So, and just as you say, if you use a smaller plate and fill it up, psychologically, you think you have tons of food than if you have a big plate and just have a little bit of food. That's why when people go to, very upscale restaurants and it looks like they only have like a drop here, a drop there, it's not worth the money. But actually, it's because it's usually on a big plate. But if you put it on a small plate and it looks like full of food, then you think you have more food. So there's a lot of stuff with our eyes playing on us, playing tricks with color, with size. Yeah.
So one I liked. So I ask you in advance because eating in the meeting is all about safe and inclusive food and beverage. And so what does that, when you're talking about your senses, how do you incorporate the senses into a safe, inclusive, and sustainable event? I mean, we just talked about food waste a little bit in that aspect, but one of the things is standing in line at the queue takes an hour, and that's kind of a negative experience of doing that. Same thing with the buffet line, So
Yeah.
how can a meeting planner take this concept, besides hiring you to come and help them do it, but how can they take this concept and it help their events, especially in a virtual world? Well, right now in a virtual world, but when we get back to eating together at a meeting.
I think if overall we help people to think much more about that aspect, the food they're going to eat and sitting around the table, and make them a part of it rather than they're just a bystander or they're just there and everything's done for them, but make them a part of it, then the food waste, the being aware of the senses, all of that becomes very important, and it plays into the whole thing. So imagine you sit down instead of lunchtime at a conference where everyone just finds a seat and grabs whatever and goes and sits down and chews it while they're trying to make business or whatever they're trying to do. If you had a more sensory approach, like, I don't know, things come to the table and they're covered and you have to smell and decide which one you want to eat based on the smell. And then everyone gets different things because they all like different senses. And then you start talking, oh, what are you eating? Oh, what is that? And it starts getting you thinking about, what do I really like? How does scent influence taste? It wakes up your whole experience of eating. I think we need to really get people more aware when they're eating, because eating like a robot and just downing food, as we said before, is just not, it's not a good experience. It's not really fun. It's not healthy. It's not good for our physical health, and it's not good for our mental health. And it's wasteful completely. So involving them more and awakening their senses in a way, I think could be, it takes more planning and more thought, but that's what I do. Like, I think about how, and also I think making the food part of the whole experience. So if the conference is about food waste, for example, when I did this for the UN, I did the Root to Flower dinner for the UN. Now, I was told normally when we have all these heads of delegations from around the world coming to discuss climate change, we'll go take them to a really nice local restaurant and we'll have dinner at the end of the day. I'm like, what a waste. You're talking about climate change, and food waste is such a big part of that. And we know that plant-based eating is an important part of that, right? We eat less meat. Why don't we make that part of the whole meal? And so you're not just eating food and talking about climate change, you're actually living the climate change. You're actually experiencing it. And that's what I brought to them. So that's a good example where you've had a lot of conferences and different kinds of, forums going on where you're talking all day and discussing, but the food's just a byproduct. But no, let's make that part of the whole experience.
And how did that go over?
Really well. I mean, every single person at the end of that dinner came up to me. We gave them all a plant to take home and plant at home, like an herb, basil or mint or whatever. And they all were holding their plants, and they came up to us and just said, wow, this was an experience I will never forget. And just because, we made them more aware and mindful, and they tasted plants in a new way. And I'm talking about people from Chile and Argentina that would never, ever consider a plant-based diet. I mean, they love their red meat. But we actually, for that dinner, we used impossible meats for 3 of the courses. And they gave it a chance just because it was part of this dinner they're invited to, and they're eating what's on the table, and it looked really gorgeous. So they gave it a chance, and then they're like, wow, it smells like meat. The whole experience was like I'm eating meat. Maybe, maybe this could be something. Whereas if we didn't give them that experience and we just told them, oh, there's all these plant-based meats out there, you should try it, or you should get your country, you should be importing this and promoting it, it wouldn't mean anything to them. They have to try it. So, yeah.
All right. think I've lost. Oh, no, there I go. Okay. And you have a big fan here in Vanessa. And you're dry. And that's for being here in London as well. I mean, I think that really does play into as well with, just whether you have a staff meeting or whether you have a conference and we're just rushing people there. And even with you have the events where you can have cooking demonstrations or get people to help make the food. I think because you're giving back, or even the CSR programs where you go and feed other people, giving back to that. It's all about that giving and enjoying and appreciating what you're eating and what's on your plate. And and farm to table dinners, meeting the farmer that made your food, or the little kids who love to show, hey mom, I grew this carrot or whatever. I mean, they learn how to appreciate it even more so as well. And exactly. I think, going back to how much money we spend on food and beverage in our events, I think it's really important that we do start to do this. And maybe our events won't be as big, going forward, which will give us a little bit more time to spend on it. Mm-hmm. Let's hope, cross our fingers, right?
Yeah, there was a chef, because I wanted to just say it's not about how fancy or complicated the meal is. That's not what it's about. Simple food is the best, and any Italian will tell you that. The more simple the ingredients, the better. But it's about the enjoyment. And there was a chef who ran a Michelin star restaurant in Switzerland, and he used to, because he was a Michelin restaurant, he used to have all of these. He called them the suits, I think. The executives come from the banks in Switzerland and bring their clients there, right? Because, if you get a table at this restaurant, it's like the top thing. So they'd bring their clients there. But he used to hate it because he put so much love into his cuisine. Uh-huh. But these people would just sit there. They're just there to show off that they're at a Michelin star restaurant. They're taking their clients there. So they would just sit there and eat the food, not pay attention, and just do their business deals, just talk.
Oh, wow.
And he was going crazy. He's like, I work so hard. I'm so creative. I won these stars. And for what? These people don't even appreciate the food. So what he did is something so simple. And I thought this was so clever. He put a plastic, like $1 little cow on the center of each table. He had round tables and he had seating. So let's say the 7 p.m. seating. Everyone gets seated and nothing happens. No, there's no waiter service, nothing. Once they're seated, nothing happens. So people start like, what's going on here? There's nothing happening. And then they'll notice this little cow in the middle of the table. So someone will eventually pick up the cow and go, what is this? And as you turn it over, it moves, goes moo. And then everyone starts laughing. And then the next table will do it. And then so soon the whole restaurant is laughing. And then the service starts because he wants to get people out of their head. And that's the whole thing.
Awesome.
Isn't that great? We have to get people getting out of their head and really enjoying the meal, enjoying their senses as they eat. Yeah.
And enjoying the company that's around the table.
Exactly. Common sense, it's called, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when we were talking earlier, because when I asked you, what do you wish people knew about what you do? And you were like, that food and sitting together around a dining table
commensality, yes.
Yep. To help us connect topics and issues in a much more meaningful way. And I replied with something that, there's so many dinners that come together in conflict, because of different issues or those business meetings and they're not focusing. But when they sit down and they break bread or they share a meal together, it changes that perspective. And actually, all right, this just popped into my head. A couple of years ago, when we had all the news about all the refugees coming to all the different countries, right? The one thing that they could share was what they made and their food that they're bringing from their country. And they may not be able to speak to you. You don't speak the same language, but they can share what they love is food, And
I didn't say that because one of the first dinners I wanted to do, and I still am dying to do, is to do a dinner with Syrian refugees. I wanted to do this in Germany 2 years ago. I found the chef and everything. He was a refugee. He'd been in Germany for 2 years, and he was a chef in a restaurant. And he was discussing it with me, and we had this whole plan to bring people together to taste, not only to have the experience of trying the amazing food, but to be immersed in it. So we would have the sounds that he remembers from his childhood, and the smells would come through with each course. And we would even use like 360 images around, like VR kind of thing, where you're immersed in the different cities and the countrysides, and each course would have a different background. So the music, the sounds, the smells, you would touch things on the table. And he even wanted to give a little workshop for those who are interested in the kitchen of how to do one of the dishes. And then we're breaking bread together with other refugees. And then we can sit and talk and see that actually we have so much more in common than we don't have in common. And the newspaper and the media is so good at just making people sound like numbers and sound like a problem. But these people all have a story, all have a history, and they didn't want to leave their land. They love their land. And so let's celebrate that, and let's learn about the real Syria, not the war-torn Syria that unfortunately that's all we see on the news, but let's learn where these people came from and really get to know them. So it's so funny you said refugees, because that was the first thing I thought of when I was thinking of how to do these multisensory dinners. I thought I want to bring people together who would never sit at the table together, because breaking bread together will change them.
Yeah, so true. And and I always love to say that I talk to strangers, because you can't make a new friend without talking to a stranger. And, and the same thing with that. I mean, you can learn so much more about somebody with, just by sharing something, sharing a story, sharing yourself, sharing some kind of ingredient. And even it's like, oh my God, that smell. And actually that reminds me of going into my grandmother's house. The first place that I went was to the kitchen, to the candy cabinet, and then what she made, and her lima beans, or, the smells of home, what those mean. And that's our senses. And it usually is typically around food.
Exactly. And our memory and our emotions are directly connected to our sense of smell, and very closely linked to our sense of hearing. So people don't realize that smell triggers, and that when you think about it, that you just smell a perfume or you smell a food and it brings you back instantly, but we don't use it enough. We don't use it in our everyday life enough, and we need to incorporate it more. So cool. Yeah, it's so important.
It is so important. Well, we are at 32 minutes actually now. I could talk to you forever about this. This is so fantastic. One question that I keep forgetting to ask everyone else, but what is your favorite food?
I really, people ask me this all the time, and I actually don't have one. I really don't. I'm very much mood and energy dependent. So, I could tell you like a certain risotto one day, that's my favorite risotto, but a different day I'll feel like something else, and that will be my favorite. I'm also Gemini, so I change all the time. So I don't have one favorite food. I really don't.
That's okay.
Enjoy good food.
Yeah. Well, and my sister-in-law was saying this morning, or it was yesterday, she's like, it's just, you have to feed for what your body knows what it needs.
Exactly.
And so you're using your senses to feed your body.
Yeah.
Based on what you smell or hear, or the taste that you need. So that's really good.
But now, my favorite drink is Campari Spritz, especially for summer.
Campari.
Yeah.
Campari. What is Campari?
Spritz. So like Aperol Spritz, but with Campari. I prefer it.
Okay. All right. Great. Now, I posted your website up here. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, or to learn more about what you're doing, or use their senses in seeing and hearing what you're doing?
I'm working on putting a sort of showreel type video together, because for now on my website, I don't have that. There are just some photos and stuff, but go to my website, innosensi.com. You can also contact me on LinkedIn, Kim Azari on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I have an Instagram account, _sensi. Those are probably the best ways. Or you can just email me directly, kim@innosensi.com.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. And are you doing any of I know you were doing virtual dinners. What's the next step, or what's the next thing that you're doing?
Yeah, so we took a break for August with the virtual dinners. We've been running them since the beginning of April because of lockdown, and they were all theme-based. So we've tackled themes like freedom, courage, identity, home, magic, really fun, where everyone's cooking their own dinner, but we have a theme. We might bring them back in September, depending. We'll see how the demand is. Otherwise, I'm also working on a new project to do with wine music pairing. So it's an app that everyone can download. It's called Wine Listening. We already have the MVP out there. So Wine Listening, where you take a picture of the label of the wine you're about to drink, and it will go into your Spotify and choose the perfect piece of music to enhance the taste of that wine. And it's all based on science, beats per minute, frequency, and pitch. So it's it's an Apple app, so it's not on Android yet. But it's really fun getting people to think about what we listen to and how it influences what we taste.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I learned so much today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
You're welcome. All right. Well, I posted all of your links on there that I have, and I just posted the app thing as well. So everybody, thank you for joining in on Eating at a Meeting. And Kim, thank you so much. She is with Innosensi and can help you create better sensory, fun dining experiences for your attendees.
You're hired.
Until next time, see you next Wednesday, everybody. Thanks for joining us at Eating at a Meeting and Thrive Meetings and Events.